Okay, be sure to download your notes page and answer the questions using this flip video in your history spiral. Be prepared for a pop quiz on the due date of this assignment. Our flip video is the 13 English colonies. There were 3 types of colonies: corporate colonies, proprietary colonies, and royal colonies. Corporate colonies were owned by companies like joint stock companies. Proprietary colonies were owned by individuals such as William Penn, who founded Pennsylvania. And royal colonies were started by the king himself, who sent royal governors to govern the colonies. By the start of the American Revolution, all colonies had been royal colonies. The first settlement we're going to talk about is Jamestown, 1607. Jamestown is our first permanent English settlement in the New World. It was started by a corporate colony. The joint stock company was called Virginia Company of London, and this company had gotten a charter from the king. The purpose of the colony was to make a profit. In order to get settlers to come to the New World and help start Jamestown, the company had to promise 2 things: political freedom and economic freedom. They promised political freedom through the House of Burgesses. The word burgher means free citizen. The House of Burgesses was a first representative legislative assembly. In other words, it was the government that was going to run Jamestown. And the men coming to Jamestown were going to be able to have a vote in the House of Burgesses. If you were white, male, and you owned property, you were able to vote for representatives to represent you in the House of Burgesses. The other promise was economic freedom through the headright system. And this economic freedom, pretty much pre-1616, for every person you brought over, or every head you brought over to the New World, you got 100 acres of free land. After 1616, the acreages dropped from 50. So after 1616, for every head you brought over, or person you had brought over to the New World, you received 50 acres of land. How did Jamestown survive? Well, when the colonists first got to the New World, the problem is that everybody was looking for gold, and none of the settlers were actually trying to make a start of Jamestown, or agriculture, or building. John Smith actually stepped in, and he instituted a motto: "He that shall not work shall not eat." John Smith helped save Jamestown. So he encouraged the settlers to actually build homes and to cultivate the land in order to survive. John Rolfe, another settler of Jamestown, also stepped up. What he discovered was a way to make tobacco grow in Jamestown. Tobacco became the cash crop of the joint stock company and Jamestown. The Virginia Company of London made lots of money through tobacco. John Rolfe later married Pocahontas. Unlike the Disney Channel, who they would like you to believe that John Smith married Pocahontas, that is not true. Pocahontas was a princess of a local Indian tribe, and she helped relationships between the settlers and the Indians. She married John Rolfe and later traveled to England and was presented to the king. While the first settlers in Jamestown were all Englishmen coming from England, by 1619, there were 2 other groups that had made it to Jamestown. First, the women. In 1619, there are women that come to Jamestown as wives for the Jamestown settlers. In order to have a wife, each settler had to pay 120 pounds of tobacco for his bride's passage. So it was kind of like a mail order bride. 120 pounds of tobacco for your wife. In 1619, we also see Africans in Jamestown. 20 kidnapped Africans came to Jamestown as indentured servants with longer terms. Slavery did not exist until much later. These Africans were eventually freed. Lastly, I want you to know about Jamestown was Bacon's Rebellion and the Tidewater Gentry. Governor Berkeley and Nathaniel Bacon. Bacon was a poor farmer living on the frontier. He asked Governor Berkeley to help fight off the natives that were bothering the settlers and attacking them. But the governor was more partial to rich tidewater gentry rather than the poor frontiers people like Bacon. So Berkeley said no, that they would not send any help. Bacon, very upset at this, at the governor and what was happening to them, decided to attack Jamestown. But he ended up dying, and then the rebellion was sort of crushed. The point of this is that there is a class problem in Jamestown between the frontier backwoods poor and the rich Virginia tidewater gentry. Now we're going to move on to a second settlement, Plymouth, in 1620. As we will do an activity in class about the Mayflower, but pilgrims were people who made as a person who makes a religious journey. And there were a group of pilgrims that went from England to the New World. Separatists are people who want to separate from the church. Puritans are people who want to purify or reform the church. So in 1620, a group of Puritan pilgrims left England. First they went to Holland, but then in Holland they were actually seeing that some of their kids were becoming more Dutch than English, so they decided to go to America for religious freedom. These Puritans were called pilgrims because of their religious journey. They were also called separatists because they were separating from the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church is the Church of England. While they were on the Mayflower, there were Anglicans, Puritans, and separatists on the Mayflower. The problem is they hit a storm, and when they hit the storm, they ended up somewhere else. And in order for them to get off the ship, they decided they needed to make an agreement, which became the Mayflower Compact. All the men on the ship signed the compact, and it was an agreement to stick together and create a government and laws. The Pilgrims finally landed and started their colony. With the help of the Indians, they were able to survive. Thanks to Abraham Lincoln in 1863, we actually celebrate this every year as a national holiday, and that was it's called Thanksgiving, where the Pilgrims and the Indians were able to sit down together and have a feast in honor of their survival.